new writers are very tempting prey to a lot of unscrupulous people because we come in with stars in our eyes and we come in with these big hopes and dreams. And anybody who says to us, I think that your writing is great and should be published, boy, we don't want to believe that they're scammers.
This is Ron Pramschufer, and welcome to Publish Basics Radio, where weekly we try to help you navigate the self-publishing minefield. So, Jenna, in researching this interview today, I've come to the conclusion that you're like the real writer's writer.
Yes, I like to think of myself that way, yes.
Now, just out of curiosity, how long did it take between when the light bulb went off in your head that you wanted to be a writer and you actually got paid for something that you had written?
It was pretty quick. I got lucky because I did sell the first article that I started pitching. But after that, I went into a pretty long dry spell where it took about 2 or 3 years before I was actually making a living at it.
All right. That was actually the next question. Now, how long have you been in the business?
8 years.
All right. And then over that time, you've written articles, you've got a couple of books you've written?
18 of them, actually.
18? Yeah. And all kind of different publishers, I see. Mm-hmm. The reason that caught my eye, you've got this online magazine that's it's kind of a writer's magazine. You're like a mentor. You want to tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. It's AbsoluteWrite.com is the online magazine, and it was originally meant to just be a showcase of my own work, and instead I got visits from so many writers asking me how did I get my screenplays optioned, how did I sell articles, and before long I figured, all right, forget about highlighting my own work. Obviously there's a need for this. People, aspiring writers, have a lot of questions, and so I decided to go ahead and make it a full-service writer's site.
Well, that's good. This comes out, every couple of weeks? Or?
Every week. Yeah, it's weekly.
And how many readers do you have?
75,000.
Oh, right. And you have time to, email them? They all ask you questions?
They really do. I get about 300 emails a day, and I do my best to answer as many as I can, but there's no way for me to answer all of them. But, yeah, they're writers, so they write.
Now, you sent me a manuscript of a book that you're about to have published called The Street Smart Writer. Mm-hmm. At first, I was just going to read the one chapter, then I couldn't help but, I've read the whole book. I mean, it's great.
Thank you.
The subtitle there is Self-Defense Against Sharks and the Scams in the Writing World. Mm-hmm. Tell us, when was the first time that you were exposed to a publishing scam?
I was 10.
And what happened?
I have a long and distinguished career of being scammed. I was 10 years old, and I was writing poetry, and I sent in a poem. I saw in the back of a magazine somewhere there was a big poetry contest advertised that promised something like, $15,000 top prize and a chance of publication. And so I sent off my poem, and I got back a letter saying, congratulations, based on your fine literary merit, you have been selected as a semi-finalist, and your poem will be published. I went bananas. I ran downstairs and said to my mom, Mom, I'm going to be a published writer. I need $40. Now, there's where the little red flag should have gone off immediately, but I was 10, and I didn't see any red flag there.
Did Mom give you the $40?
She did. Yes, she did.
All right. So
it was a requirement that if you were going to have your poem published in this book, you had to buy the anthology. And little did I know that everybody got named as semi-finalists. I really thought that they thought that my poem was terrific, and they were choosing it based on its literary merit, just like they said. And it wasn't until many years later that I found out what a giant scam this was, that everybody gets named semi-finalists. Everybody has the opportunity to have their poem published in this anthology, which is not sold in bookstores, not carried in libraries. It's just sold to the people who are in the book. And that's poetry.com, which is also known under a couple of different names, the International Library of Poetry, the National Library of Poetry. It's gone through various different names through the years.
Now, are they the only ones? Because I seem to see when I look at these writers' magazines, these contests seem to all over the place.
Mm-hmm. It's big business. It's very big business. They're not the only ones. There are a number of others. Iliad Press and Cater Press, I think, is another one. See, new writers are very tempting prey to a lot of unscrupulous people because we come in with stars in our eyes and we come in with these big hopes and dreams. And anybody who says to us, I think that your writing is great and should be published, boy, we don't want to believe that they're scammers. We don't want to believe that they could have anything bad in their heart because they're the first people who are supporting us and telling us that we have talent. So it's easy to fall for these types of things when you're that excited and hopeful.
All right. And even some of the better magazines, like Writer's Digest, I get that every month. I think every writer in the world gets it, because it's cheap and, a lot of good stories. But there seems to be agents advertising there all the time. I mean, do agents advertise? I mean, is that, like, where do they find you guys?
Right. No, that's a great question. Legitimate agents do not need to pay for advertising. They don't pay for advertising in the back of magazines. Writer's Digest, I know, is trying to be better about the kinds of ads that they accept. There's a fairly new editor-in-chief. I think she started a year and a half ago or so, and she's trying her best to vet these ads a lot more closely than her predecessors did. But yeah, legitimate magazines, and because they're legitimate magazines, a lot of writers feel like, well, if it was in, one of these legitimate magazines, then the agent must be legitimate. But unfortunately, there are a number of unscrupulous agents, unscrupulous publishers, unscrupulous book doctors that do pay for advertising either in the back of magazines or in Google AdWords. You'll find a lot of them in the Google AdWords, in newspapers, even in the back of like the National Enquirer, has different kinds of poetry contests and things. No, legitimate agents are inundated by submissions every day, and they have no need to pay for advertising. If there's a fairly new agent who's legitimate, all he or she has to do is tell a couple of writers or a couple of editors, hey, I'm looking for some new clients. They put out the word and the submissions come pouring in. There's no need for them to ever have to pay for advertising saying, hey, new is wanted.
So where, if they don't average, like where would the average writer here? I finally worked on my manuscript and I think I'm ready to roll. I think I need an agent. Where would I go find one? If I don't go to Writer's Digest, where do I go?
Excellent question. And there's no one definitive source that doesn't require any kind of cross-referencing. But there are several different books on the market. Jeff Herman has a guide, Writer's Guide to Book Editors, Publishers, and Literary Agents. It's a good guide, but it requires some cross-referencing because every one of these kinds of books, a couple of lousy agents sneak their way in.
How about Literary Marketplace? Now, is that a legit place? I mean, that's like I used to sell printing. I mean, that was like the Bible.
Yes, a Literary Marketplace, sure. That's terrific. I think that's usually a library book, though, right? That's not.
Yeah, it's like about $300-400 book.
Yeah, it's expensive.
But they have a section on agents. Would they all be legit, or would you really just have to do your homework?
You'd have to do your homework no matter where you look. There's also, I think Writer's Digest puts out the 2005 Guide to Literary Agents. There's a couple of online magazines that have guides to literary agents. And what you need to do is use these as your starting ground, as a way of finding different places to start looking for agents. That's fine. Another excellent way to find agents is in the acknowledgement sections of books. If you look in your favorite books that are on the same genre that you're writing in, look to see in that acknowledgement section, does the author thank their agent? Often they do. And so you'll know if you've picked up a book and it was published by, Random House, Simon & Schuster, and the person lists their agent, thank you so much to my agent for helping me with my career. Write that down. That's a great name. Publishers Weekly is another great source to look in because they list whenever an agent from another agency breaks out on their own and starts their own agency, that's a good time to try and contact that agent because that agent may be looking to expand their client list. Or an editor from a publishing house crosses over and decides to become an agent. Publishers Weekly reports these sorts of things all the time, and those are definitely good names to pick up on.
Okay, now you mentioned actually Publishers Weekly is fairly expensive, so not that many writers get it.
Right.
Is that a magazine that you can see in the library?
Yes. Almost all libraries have it, and if not, they can usually get it through an interlibrary loan. So let's say you've got now a good list of agents that you think you would like to contact. There are so many now websites that you can go to research these different agents. One is called Predators and Editors, www.anotherrealm.com/prededitors.
Okay.
Or you could just Google it.
Okay.
But it's that's a fantastic source, and if I had found that before I ever started looking for an agent, I would never have fallen in with a couple of these lousy agents that I did, and I never would have paid that $200 upfront fee because they're all listed without. Most of them don't have long explanations, but they just say recommended or not recommended, and they give a short reason sometimes why they're not recommended, such as upfront fees or, no legitimate sales or whatever the reason may be. So that's an excellent source to check. Another one is writerbeware.org, and it's a volunteer organization that they run through the science fiction and fantasy writers of America. They will tell you what they know. If you write to them and say, I'm interested in this particular agent. Can you tell me, is this agent legit? They will write back to you and tell you, yes, this agent has made legitimate sales, or no, we have a number of reports from people who are not happy with them, and here are the reasons why. And then the third source to check is my own message boards at Absolute Rights. We have a Bewares and background check, and people can go there and type in the name of the agent or publisher, whatever they're looking up, and there may very well be threads about it already on the message board if there has been any kind of doubt about them. And if not, start up your own thread and just ask, can anybody tell me, is this agency legitimate? And people will jump in and tell you what they know.
All right. Now, you mentioned publishers. Now, if I go to the Yellow Pages, giant full-page ad, books wanted, manuscripts wanted, authors wanted, be published.
Mm-hmm.
Who are these guys?
Usually Vanity Presses.
Okay, and I noticed, Vanity Press happen to be a pet peeve of mine. I noticed you have a very, very clear, concise definition in your book that I love. That just seems to be a lot of confusion over what, because they change their name so many different times.
Mm-hmm.
When do you know that you're dealing with a Vanity Press?
When you have to give them money.
That's it.
That's it.
You have to pay to publish your book. That's it. Now, using that definition of if you have to pay to publish the book, you're using a vanity publisher, there's got to be 50,000 books a year being published by these all types of publishers.
Yeah, I would think so.
Why do you think that there's so many?
I'm not going to lie about this. It is hard to get a book published legitimately. There's a lot of competition, and there's a lot of work that goes into perfecting your craft, really getting a book that's up to speed. And there's a lot of lousy first manuscripts out there that people should have left in their desk drawers.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also people who just haven't done the research to figure out which kind of publishers would be the best for their kind of work, or who are just looking to rush into print without going through the steps of sending out query letters and trying to attract a conventional publisher. People talk about the great American novel, and I think my guess is that there are more people now than ever who are trying to write novels and nonfiction books and screenplays. It seems like a very attractive career to have. So people finish their manuscript, and the very next day they want to see it in print. They figure they already put in the hard work of doing the writing, so now the publishers should be flocking to them. And when that doesn't happen, they're looking for a quick way to get an acceptance. And Vanity Presses offer a very easy acceptance.
Yeah, you've actually got a very nice quote that I'll repeat here. In your book, you say, they would rather be placated with lies, even if it costs them dearly, than lose the fantasy that somebody believed in them.
Mm-hmm.
They want to believe.
Mm-hmm. Often.
Now, is there any difference, Bo? You're a little younger than I am, but is there any difference between the Vanity Press of the day and the Vanity Press of yesteryear?
The main difference is just the method of printing. Vanity presses of old were using offset printing, and vanity presses today are mostly using the print-on-demand publishing model, which could be great. There's nothing inherently wrong with print-on-demand, because the whole idea is that you're printing one copy at a time instead of printing 500 or 1,000 copies at a time. However, it's more expensive to print that way, so the cover prices of the book are going up because of that. And because it literally is so easy and so cheap, it makes it even more of an impulse kind of a thing for people to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so the quality, the overall quality of print-on-demand books is pretty lousy.
How about traditional self-publishing? You don't seem to be like a real big fan of that either, actually.
It's not that I'm not a big fan of that. I don't have very strong feelings either way, because I've seen people succeed with it and I've seen people fail with it. And that, however, does give you more of a legitimate chance, if you do the legwork, that you do have more of a legitimate chance of getting into bookstores and making real sales, because you set the policy. It's up to you whether you're going to accept returns. It's up to you what distributor you're going through. There's not the same bias attached to the name of your publisher, because you can name the publisher yourself. It can be the kind of situation where if you haven't done enough research and you don't fully understand this process and aren't willing to put in, it's basically a full-time job for several months. If you can't do that, you may very well end up with 1,000 copies of your book sitting in your garage. But if you do educate yourself on the process and do conventionally self-publish and take on all these roles yourself, I do know at least a couple of authors who've made a very good living self-publishing books.
Okay, yeah, no, because in your book you do list, about a dozen different reasons why, you said vanity or self-publishing might be a good option.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all.
Yeah, there are times certainly when it's not. I sometimes feel like I'm coming off snobby about the whole thing, and I don't mean to, because there are legitimate reasons to go with to either self-publish or go with a vanity press even. If you have a niche book that is on a very specific small topic that's not going to interest the publisher because they're not going to sell enough copies to make it worth it for them. However, you have a way to get to that audience. If you belong to a club, if you are a magazine editor, if you have any kind of a way to reach the audience directly and you want to do that, then there's no reason not to self-publish as long as you're willing to put in the work. Same with things like it's very, very difficult to get a book of poetry published. If you have just a family history that you want to publish for your own family, things like that, it can be satisfying and completely fine to either self-publish or go with one of the POD presses.
All right. Well, Jenna, thank you very much for being with me today.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope you come back on again another day.
I'd love to. Thanks so much for all that you're doing to help educate writers.
For Publishing Basics Radio, this is Ron Pramschufer. See you next week.
This program is produced by Jack Street Media as part of the affiliate Nanocasting Network. Thanks for listening.